the session. I hope we can all see the screen.
Yeah, I can see it.
Great. So we are very welcome to this final session that we're having as part of the Evidence Week. And this very session seeks to discuss amongst our panelists and amongst us as a larger audience what the conditions are like when we consider expanding evidence-informed decision-making support services or activities beyond our immediate boundaries. Many organizations on the continent operate within their immediate jurisdictions. And so this is to help us explore ideas around what works in other jurisdictions and what doesn't work. So on that note, we are all welcome to today's session. And just as a starter, I would want to just provide a little background, of the objectives, just touch on the objectives for a moment, and then we can proceed to have our panelists introduce themselves, after which we will move into the real conversation. So the main objective of this session is to introduce all of us to to various conditions that exists as part of expansion activities for evidence-informed decision-making and what works in each setting as we have them. We will basically be looking at the different political, economic conditions in each of our countries and see what we can get out of those. I will want to just touch on a few points, kind of ground rules for our interaction today, which will basically be that we will first listen to our panelists express their positions. If there are any questions, we can pose those questions through the chat boxes and they will be picked up and the panelists will react to them as and when they need to. But opportunity will also be given for the audience to open up their microphones and then interact live as well by posing questions via the audio platforms. If in the course of our interaction you have any technical hitch, you may want to share that either through the chat boxes if it works for you, but if the platform is not active, you can send message to our inbox, which is info@paxafrica.org, and we can see there's a technical support officer sitting aside, and he will provide the necessary support that we can to colleagues. On that note, let me move to welcome our panelists first and foremost to introduce themselves, after which we will begin the conversation. We will take Gilchrist to introduce himself, then we will have Ezekiel, and then Euphrasia, and then Ferdinand. We will take them in that order. So, Mr. Ndongwe, you have the floor.
Greetings, and how are you? And I hope we have enjoyed the evidence week, which was quite fruitful and rich in deliberations. My name is Gilchrist Ndongwe. I'm a director and the co-founder of the Zimbabwe Evidence-Informed Policy Network. Essentially, we are a non-governmental organization which works to promote and facilitate the use of evidence in policymaking, development, and governance. We have been in existence for the past, I think this is our 12th year in existence. We are also an active member of the Africa Evidence Network. My co-director and co-founder is in the what you call the reference group. Yes, so this is essentially us. So we work with government, multilateral institutions, bilateral institutions, and other development partners within the development and policy making sector and governance sector in promoting the use of evidence in policy making. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Gilchrist. We will take introduction from Mr. Ezekiel Jallo.
Hi, everybody. My name is Ezekiel Jallo. I'm the founder and the director of ZECLab. ZECLab is a statistical and econometrical bureau of studies based in Abidjan here in Cote d'Ivoire. So I've founded the bureau in 2019. So it's about 2 years ago. But before that, I was consultant for the World Bank and other international institutions here in Abidjan. So I've been here for 6 years, more than 6 years, but I'm not originally from Cote d'Ivoire. I'm from Togo. You are going to excuse me for my bad English, but I'm going to do my best to make myself understood. I think that's all for now.
Thank you very much, Ezekiel. Euphrasia will take over for us.
Thank you very much, Kekovs, and hello to everyone. Good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be with you. My name is Euphrasia Ibai Atot. I'm actually the team lead of Camcosto. Camcosto means Cameroon's Consumer Service Organization, and we are out to protect and to promote the rights of the consumer in whatever field, be it basic service, goods and services, health, education, what have you. I'm also an executive within the Cochrane Consumer Network, and we actually look out to promote the use of evidence in healthcare decision making. Thank you. It's a pleasure being with you this afternoon. Hello to my fellow panelists.
Thank you for that quick one also, Euphrasia. Finally, we will have Ferdinand.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Kirshus. I hope all the rest you can hear me well. As Kirshus said, my name is Ferdinand Okwaro. I'm a Kenyan. My background is in social sciences, specifically medical anthropology, and currently working at the Aga Khan University in East Africa as a health researcher. Previously, I've worked at the African Institute for Development Policy here in Nairobi, and this is where I met with Kirshus, and we interacted a lot in many of the activities in evidence around in the sector of evidence-informed decision-making or policy formulation. I would describe myself as a person working in the interface between research and policy making, of which evidence-informed decision-making is, or the use of evidence is essential, and have a specific interest in that translation. I'm happy to be part of this panel and to share a few of my ideas, but also to learn a lot from colleagues across the continent. And thanks a lot. Looking forward.
Thank you very much, Ferdinand, for closing the introduction for us. I must say that this team The panelists team was deliberately selected to provide insights from countries across the African region. The only exception here is the North African sub-region, which we didn't have because we didn't have any network in there, but we're hoping as time goes on, our network base will expand within the North African sub-region. As you noticed from the introductions, these are professionals within the discipline, and they are making every effort to drive evidence-informed decision-making within their communities. But that shouldn't end there, and we're going to discuss in this session opportunities, conditions, risks, and threats, all of those that exist as we seek to expand our activities beyond our immediate boundaries. If you're in the audience, please feel free to share your perspectives once again. You can do that via the text, the chat box, or when the time is due, we will open up the space. You can raise your hand, unmute yourself, and then ask your questions or share your perspectives as well, especially colleagues from the North African sub-region. We notice Ahmed is amongst us here. He's from Morocco. We're happy to receive all those perspectives. So the idea is to make this as conversational as possible, which is why we emphasize that the panelists don't contribute PowerPoint presentations. That is not what we are seeking to do here, but it's supposed to be a conversation of what works and what doesn't work in terms of environment, and then the other conditions for evidence EIDM support activities in their respective countries. The knowledge that we will acquire here collectively will be shared by all others from the network, from within the Africa Evidence Network, which will be useful even beyond the EIDM space. On that note, I will want to move on and then invite Ferdinand. You may want to start for us and then just give us a quick introduction of the country Kenya, focusing on the political processes, including the government, the political structure, the distribution of power, the legal and administrative traditions, the agenda of national issues, opportunities for consensus building, things like that. We are very much happy to listen to your perspectives on those. Thank you, Ferdinand.
Yeah, thanks a lot. I'm not so sure if you're following the biblical, the last shall be first in, in selecting who speaks. But I'm glad to open up the discussion and first say thanks a lot for giving us a bit of a run in some of the areas that we need to touch base on in the instructions that you sent to us. And so I just tried to scribble something here and there so that I don't go on rambling forever. But again, permit me to just go very quickly, because some of the sub areas that you highlighted in the entrance in the notes could take a bit of time. And I think we need to spend more time on the EIDM area, not so much the background. So just a bit of Kenya. Kenya is a country in East Africa. Currently, we recently celebrated 58 years of independence and a former colony of Britain. Our first president, Mzee Jomo Kenyatta, was colleagues or shared a vision with, of course, Ghana's Kwame Nkrumah, Nyerere's Tanzanian's Nyerere, later day Mugabe, who was seen as green lights in Africa, shaping the social and economic development post-independence. Of course, where that dream disappeared to has been subject of a lot of theses, and obviously not the subject of our discussion today. But nevertheless, suffice to mention that some of the pitfalls, some of the successes, or the landmines left in place by our founding fathers continue to exercise influence in the going-ons in the countries that we have today. A good example is the legacy of colonialism, in the sense that many African countries still tend to lean towards their former colonies in both resource allocation, but also ideological leanings. Although China, of course, as we all know, is coming in very strongly, Americans are also coming into Africa. Population-wise, Kenya has 47 million people, 47.5 million, and this is as per our last census, 2019, and 42 different ethnic groups, with, of course, different ethnic languages and different ethnic locations. I would say generally the ethnic groups do coexist peacefully, except a few times. For those of you who've read about the Kenyan history, there's a bit of an eruption of ethnic fighting around election time. And this is brought about by the fact that a good number of the political parties in Kenya are organized along tribal lines. And therefore, once a cohort of tribes encapsulated in a political party lose, and they feel that there is unfairness in the political process, sometimes clashes do erupt, but they rarely last more than 2 to 3 months. I think the worst is when we had in 2007, 2008, that attracted global attention, including the AU, Americans, with the UN, and the late Kofi Annan, who came in to mediate the peace. For those of you who might have followed Kenya's history, that was the worst, and it lasted like 3 months with about 1,500 fatalities. But generally, the tribes do coexist well. Another source of tribal animosity is simple clashes over resources, pastoralists versus agriculturalists, or sometimes even pastoralists amongst themselves are based on cattle theft. So that happens, but we've never had prolonged inter-ethnic fights in the country. In terms of the age structure, Kenya is mainly a youthful country with, out of the population of 47.5, 35.6 is below 35 years. So about 75% of the population is youthful. Religious fundamentalism, not a lot. We only see it at the Kenyan coast, because Kenyan coast is mainly Muslim. And I'm not saying that the Kenyan coast, all of it, but just pockets of radicalized youths related or connected to the Al-Shabaab terror group in Somalia. You know, Kenya does border Somali on the northern side. And actually, the Kenya-Somali, we have the Somali group both in Kenya and Somalia. And so there's often cross-border movement. And we have the Al-Shabaab has been accused of, and rightfully sometimes, of radicalizing youths and shipping them to Somalia for radicalization and training interactivities. And just suffices to say that Kenya has also received quite some amount of terror activities, both in Nairobi. The 1997 one is the major one, the attack on the American embassy. But we've also had an we've also had a university. Hello, can you hear me well?
Yes, we can hear you, Ferdinand.
Yeah, there was a bit of noise in the background, so I thought maybe I got lost. So a bit of, there has been some terror activities in the country, but these are usually quelled quickly. But that's due to the fact that we border Somalia and the Al-Shabaab is in Somalia. Quickly, in terms of the main economic activity, agriculture is the main economic activity, contributing 35% of the GDP. Industry 16%, and services is 42%. So it's mainly agriculture, industry, and services. We've had an inflation rate this year of 5.53%, but the situation has been made worse, like the rest of the world, by COVID-19, but also recently the rise in global fuel prices. A bit about technology and its acceptance in Kenya. I think I would rate Kenya as one of the most tech-savvy countries, and this can be exemplified by the expanded use of mobile technology. And of course, you can't talk of Kenyan technology without M-Pesa. I think it's a Kenyan invention, mobile money, where you can transact all your businesses on telephone. You can transfer money or get money, make payment for goods and services. I don't know if it's spread in Ghana, but it's spread in several other parts of the world. And when President Obama visited in 2016, I think he also got an M-Pesa account where you can transfer money on your phone. Take computer, trends and whatnot technologically, I would say Kenya is doing quite well. A bit of value and attitudes towards work, I would classify it quickly in terms of there's a division between the private sector and the public sector. And like in many other parts of the world, the Kenyan public servants have this expression, why do today what you can live for tomorrow? What will you do tomorrow if you do all the work today? So there's always that bit of slowness in the public service offices, the culture of coming and leaving your coat on the seat, and everybody thinks you're there on Friday, yet you left, you come on Monday morning, But this is also changing slowly because the government is introducing the culture of performance appraisal, which is recent. So there's quite some improvement. It's not just a dead sector. So that would be on the government side, but on the private side is serious. There's a proper value and work attitude. Of course, we don't talk about remuneration, but you have in the private sector issues about clocking in and clocking out and being measured or work being calculated in terms of hours worked per week. So that is the main difference. A bit therefore about governance. Of course, like many other countries, Kenya has had its own share of governance changes since independence. We have now the expression of constitutional coups, where you have a government of the day trying to change the constitution so that they can remain in power for long. But without going into the history, the key landmark is in 2010, where Kenya ushered in a new constitution that brought in a new governance structure. That is the devolved system. And in a nutshell, what is the devolved system? We have now the national government, which has the executive arm, the president, the deputy president, and his cabinet. We also have the judiciary. The judiciary has the apex Supreme Court, then the appeal court and the high courts, as well as the magistrate courts going down. And we have parliament. And the parliament is made up of two houses. And this is some totally new from what we had in the pre-2010 constitution. And the parliament has got two houses, the National Assembly and the Senate. And these are elected. We have about 290 constituencies, each constituency with a member of parliament. And we also have nominated members of parliament. So a big parliament of about 359 members of parliament, and then a Senate that has got 69 senators. Just in a nutshell, there is a bit of back and forth between the Senate and the National Assembly, with each of the houses saying we are superior to the other. Of course, the Constitution has set clearly what the functions of the two different parliaments are, but that never stops them from having this back and forth of who is superior and who isn't. Sometimes the National Assembly can pass something and it's got to be approved by the Senate, and the Senate says, no, the proper process was not followed, and vice versa. So the usual kind of like sibling rivalry. So that's the level of the national government. But then we have another level of county government, 47 county governments. And each of the 47 county governments is headed by a governor who has his cabinet. So sort of the executive arm of the county government, and then a county assembly, which is made up of elected members of the county assembly. And at this level also, this is responsible for local policy formulation and implementation of devolved functions. So the national government allocates funding to the 47 county governments, a certain amount of funding, and keeps part of the funding also at the national level. And again, this is a source of a lot of back and forth and complaints from the county governments because most of the functions are devolved, but 75% of the budget is still with the national government. So since 2010, actually it was enacted 2013, a lot of back and forth. And I would say these are just like teething problems of any new governance structure. It needs to be continuously streamlined at some point, maybe in a couple of 20 years or so, of continuous new implementation of this constitution. Things might run well. So just to summarize, if so that I don't take a lot of time on this background, is that we have an election cycle every 5 years, and of course where we elect the total, both members of the national government and the county government at the same time. So we have many, a voter gets to the voter booth and will go to elect 7 different levels of government, people into government offices. But as we know in our countries, each government comes with a new agenda based on the promises they made to the people. For example, this government that we have elected in 2017, by the way, sorry, I should have mentioned, we're going to elections next year in August, came up with four key agendas known as the Big Four. This was enhancing manufacturing, food security and nutrition, universal health coverage, and affordable housing. As we go to the election next year, there will be a good evaluation of how the government has performed in all those 4. And of course, this is not the subject of our discussion today. It will be too big, too deep to get in there. But why I mention that is that these were big things, and there is an opportunity, or there was an opportunity in here for anyone interested in looking at how research and policy work together to evaluate and see how the policies around these 4 big agendas were implemented and evaluated, and if actually there was evidence in the selection of these 4 as the top 4 agenda for that government. But as we all know, in the evidence-informed decision making, evidence is just one bit of the deliberations. There are usually several other deliberations of which political inclinations or promises made by politicians find their way into what is given priority. So it's an interesting area. How Kenya is receptive to new ideas? I would say very much, yes, because Kenya is a UN hub in East Africa. And there's influx of so many ideas, so many resources, so many structures. So we have British, Americans, other Africans, the Chinese, the Japanese, coming all with new ideas, resources, agendas, etc. So Kenya is quite receptive, but one must always ask, like in many African countries, linkages to this receptivity and possibilities of getting support and resources. We have good relationships with our neighbors, Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania, Ethiopia, Burundi, etc. The breakup of the East African community in 1977-78 was a very low moment, but there have been attempts to revive it and also to include now other countries. Initially, it was Kenya, Uganda, and Tanzania, but now we have Rwanda, Burundi, Ethiopia also coming in, and Sudan. The charters have not been signed, and we have meetings, so it's difficult to tell why the East African community is not coming into place, but suspicion and fear of economic dominance by the bigger economies plays a big role. So maybe I could stop there, but just say finally, in terms of political environment and risks as listed in some of the notes we need to talk about,
just hold on with the risks, because that is going to be the next line of discussions we'll be having. So for now, we want to look at just the descriptives of the societies and what happens, what is happening within our communities. So thank you very much, Ferdinand, for that succinct introduction you gave us about Kenya, and certainly it shows that even though you were the last, you certainly have the vibes to give us the details as the first. Thank you very much once again. And just to mention that the conversation will be in two folds. There's the first one we're having now is to pick up on the descriptives, which other colleagues are going to do now. So I'll be coming to you, Gilchrist, after which I go to Euphrasia, and then I come to Ezekiel. Then the second batch of conversations will then go into the potential risks for entry, especially within, so generally within the country for business organizations, but specifically we want to look at the evidence to policy space. So we'll be looking at some of those areas, and I believe panelists have taken note of the details that were shared in the briefs that were distributed. On this note, Gilchrist, if you are there, you may want to unmute and then speak to us about Zimbabwe, the great Zimbabwe.
Yes, the great Zimbabwe. Good evening, guys. I'll talk briefly about Zimbabwe. Zimbabwe is a landlocked presidential republic in Southern Africa with a population of 16 million and a literacy rate of about 88% to 90%. Technically, Zimbabwe is a constitutional democracy by virtue of the fact that there are three pillars of the state: the executive, judiciary, and the legislature. And these derive their mandate from the Constitution of Zimbabwe. Politics in Zimbabwe has been dominated by the Zimbabwe African National Union Patriotic Front, ZANU-PF, since independence in 1980. So predominantly ZANU-PF has been in power since 1980 up to now, with the President Robert Mugabe. The late President Robert Mugabe was then cooped out in 2017. In 2013, Zimbabwe adopted a new constitution which removed some presidential powers and limited the president to 2 terms for 2 5-year terms. So this is a positive. This was a positive on de facto or de jure level. This was a positive development. Then between 1997 and 2000, Zimbabwe went through a period of political turmoil, economic decline, as the government had implemented a compulsory land distribution policy to dramatically reduce white commercial farms and provide more land to black Zimbabweans. So this led led to political turmoil, and political turmoil led to sanctions, EU sanctions, making Zimbabwe a bit isolated between 1997 and 2008. The economy rebounded between 2009 and 2012. This was mainly attributed to the government of national unity. When Morgan Tsvangirai and the MDC went into power, they shared fake powers with Robert Mugabe. By then, the economy, there was a bit of confidence in the economy in terms of investment. The challenging economic situation at that time was felt across country, across the government, private sector, and the communities, which were facing severe resource challenges. And most of the programs were now funded by donors. So then we also had a period of hyperinflation, perhaps up to 2020, 2021. And the cause of Zimbabwe's hyperinflation has been attributed to numerous economic shocks. The national government increased the money supply in response to the rising national debt, and there were significant declines in economic output and exports. And this was coupled, and the political corruption was coupled with a fundamentally weak economy. So Zimbabwe is facing multifaceted challenges, although we are on the path of growth, such as youth unemployment, and the youth bulge, large informal sector, and the high population growth. Then also given these multifaceted challenges, there is a growing acceptance in government that information and evidence can play a crucial role in addressing, in providing some of the solutions to national, to the nation's problems and challenges. So there is a growing acceptance that evidence is key in addressing some of the nation's problems. So, for example, recently we launched the integrated resource-based management system. It was first drafted in 2005. Then we did some work on it. Now in 2021, it has been finally adopted in the course of implementation. And we also have the National Monitoring and Evaluation Policy, which was launched with funding from the World Bank. So essentially, to round off, Zimbabwe's political landscape is deeply contested and fragmented, with the opposition constantly challenging the legitimacy of the present government. So before we going forward, before, like for example, Ketchup was talking of the risks, and we also need to look at the political economy of knowledge, and see and perhaps get into detail if there is a direct correlation between the use of evidence and the type of governance and political system in all these African states. So a question such as, do democratic government use evidence more than autocratic fragile failed states? So essentially, in brief, this is what Zimbabwe is all about. So I think, Ketchup, should we talk about the political economy of knowledge production versus the demand and supply of evidence within the national policy-making and decision-making infrastructure in the country, or it's scheduled for later?
Yes, so those who are scheduled for the second bit of the conversation. So you can rest with that for us in the meantime. Is that okay?
Yeah, that's fine. So in brief and in short, this is the essential of the political and economic setup of Zimbabwe. Yes.
Thank you very much, Gilchrist. And we will move on to Euphrasia. If you're there, you may want to give us a background of Cameroon.
Yeah, sure. Thank you very much, Kikos. And I want to appreciate my co-panelists for all they have said. A very elaborate introduction of their countries. And I want to thank them also because, my country, Cameroon, is said to be Africa in miniature. So effectively, they've said much about my country already. So actually, Cameroon is a Central African country, largely French-speaking, has 2 English-speaking regions, which are currently undergoing socio-political crisis for the past 4 years. We've been in a civil, I dare call it a civil war, because even though the government is not giving it that scale, but I dare call it a civil war, the effect that it has currently on the country. So actually, just like Kenya, our country too is, its governance structure is legislative, judiciary, and executive. And when it comes to legislative, we have 2 houses. We have the House of the Senate, and we have the National Assembly. And when it comes to judiciary, we have the president and the ministers and governors, mayors, and all that. So my country has been struggling, I think, between 2 forms of governance, I dare to say, which is democracy and I think an autocratic way of governing people, because on paper is democracy. A country is considered a democratic country, but in reality, I will not describe it as such. I will not describe it as such, because in a country where people are not allowed to discuss issues about the form of the state, I cannot call it a democracy, even when that form of the state happens to be a problem to the people. So I cannot call it a democracy. So the long and short of it is, when I look at, in terms of decision making, which I think is our interest, our point of interest here, I really think that my country adopts an approach of the top-down approach of decision making, because you see that in the different sectors of the economy, you just have, ministers and their secretary generals passing laws, and not really laws, let me say, already having a plan of activities that they push down, to shuffle down the necks of those who are on the ground, on the field for execution. And little room is given actually for the layman to actually influence decision making, which is why civil organizations like us, Cameroon Service consumer service organization like us was actually best actually look into cases like that, because we think that our voices should be heard. We think that the Cameroonians' voice should be heard, and we look forward to holding our leaders accountable for our living conditions, for the decision that they make and all of that. So our country is largely influenced by external forces, I can say, like the rule of France. And we have our major resources being controlled by external countries like France and Switzerland and things like that, and other countries, and Britain. So the long and short of it is that from the consumer perspective, from a civilian perspective, I don't actually see the power of decision making in the hands of the consumer. I don't actually see that, because if you're living in a country where, let me say, a 1 week shutdown of the borders actually leave people going hungry, then I don't actually see the level of economic power that the layman wills, or even the sectors in the country will actually, supply the needs of their consumers. So I don't know if I've exhausted my time, but just to say that when it comes to support activities within the country for evidence uptake, I think they're very limited. But thank God, I think that reality presents, and with the ongoing socioeconomic and political crisis in the two Anglophone regions of my country, I think there's a wake-up call for the government, which is trying now to, put in place measures to hasten the decentralization that have been in the cupboards for 25 years now, ongoing, in order to some sort of share power and, decentralize activities and improve the economic situations of the citizens of Cameroon. So fingers crossed, and hoping that our almost 40-year in power leader is going to realize that things have changed, and, governments and structures to have to change to adapt to the needs of the people. So thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Euphrasia, for that introduction on Cameroon. And before Ezekiel takes over, I'll just want to mention that after Ezekiel is done, I would come back to all panelists and pick your views on kind of, I would want to take a quantitative estimation of the extent to which politics in your respective countries orient towards consensus building. So on a scale of 1 to 10, where you would want to place your country. 1 being obviously the least, consensus oriented society, and then 10 being the highest possible scale or level of consensus region. So that is just to note. I'll come back to all panelists on this. If you give the rating, then you may want to speak a little to the role that the media plays within your respective countries towards consensus building. Ezekiel, I will come to you. I'm now with you. We would want to listen to the background, the introduction of La Cote d'Ivoire.
Thank you so much. I won't be long, but I will try to say something about Cote d'Ivoire. I realized that I should have prepared something very, let's say, very well structured, but I will just give some ideas, and at the end, if you want, you can ask specific questions. And I'll try to bring some more details. So
that is appreciated. Yeah.
Okay. So Cote d'Ivoire is a francophone country in West Africa. The population is about the last census was in 2014. It was about 22.7 million. Now the projections are about 27 million. People in the country. The political situation currently, we have the President Alassane Ouattara, who was first elected in 2010, after Laurent Gbagbo has ruled the country for 10 years. And when he was elected, Gbagbo didn't accept that he lost the elections, and it brought the country to a crisis, a political crisis that lasts some months until 2011. And when Alassane came to the power, they sent Laurent Gbagbo to the International Penal Court. So he spent 7 years, more than 7 years, and recently came back to the country. So Alassane Ouattara, normally the constitution that was in place, one couldn't be elected for more than two times. But in 2016, he changed the constitution. That was part of his promises when he was doing his campaign. So he said that he would change the constitution, but he was not. He said clearly that he was not going to be elected for a third term. But the one he was preparing to succeed, to come after him, passed away. And then he said, now I'm going to be president again. So he was elected for the third time, and this is the real problem. Actually, currently, it looks like what just happened so he's on his third term, and the very challenge is going to be about the next elections, which is going to be in 2025, so in 4 years. But we hopefully want him to prepare the conditions so that elections can be done in good conditions. And they are talking about reconciliation, because people of Gbagbo has a lot of people that support him, and we have the prior president. Is it the word prior? He was president just after the first president passed away in 1993. His name is Henri Konan-Bédié. So he led the country from 1983 to 1993 to 1998, when he general of army did a coup, and then it's after the election in 2000 that Gbagbo came to the power. So this is the situation, the political situation of Cote d'Ivoire, and surely heard about Guillaume Soro also, who supported. He was the chief of the rebels when Gbagbo was on power from 2000 up to 2010. He was the leader of the rebels, and he supported Alassane Ouattara when he came to power. And then later on, they were not in good harmony. They were not understanding each other, and then he wanted to put him to prison, and he flew away from the country. He's now somewhere in asylum. Is that the word? So he's in Europe somewhere, and he's. They are looking for. They are trying to get him, to bring him to the court, because they said that he was preparing coup to Ouattara. So there is a situation that is very not it's not very good for the country. But what everybody is wishing here is so that they can prepare this reconciliation very well, so that things go well up to the next elections. Otherwise, it's not said that we are not going to go through something like in Guinea, or maybe have another election with a lot of problems like we had in the past. So this is the political situation, and about the economic situation. Cote d'Ivoire, before the COVID-19, the GDP rate was about 8% every year. And with the COVID, I think it's dropped down up to less than 3, I think. I don't have the latest figures for the current GDP growth. And the agriculture is the main activity or the main sector that contribute to the economy. Cote d'Ivoire is the first country that produces cocoa, cashew, and the second for coffee, I think. And we have a lot of cash crops such as rubber, cotton, and etc. And what else? Let me stop here, and if you have some questions, ask me, and it will be easier for me. Sorry for being
certainly that introduction is very much appreciated. And so I'll take again from you, Ezekiel. Maybe you can start the next round of questions. I mean, on the rating, how would you rate the opportunity for consensus building within La Cote d'Ivoire on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being kind of the least possible consensus building opportunities, and then 10 being the highest? Where would you place the current climate within policy climate within La Cote d'Ivoire in terms of consensus building? And then you may want to touch it also or extend that into the media, the role of the media. How does the media feed in that opportunity for consensus building? Ezekiel.
I would say 6. 6 because before when this president came to power, we had people even from the National Assembly that have immunity that are put in prison, and journalists. If you when the media criticize the power, sometimes they just are going to catch you and put you into jail without maybe very good trial. So I think I would say 6. It's more than the average, because recently with the coming back of Gbagbo and meeting the current president, and meeting the other, these 3 guys are the one who are at the origin of Cote d'Ivoire problem. So Gbagbo, Bédié, and Alassane Ouattara. So they have met not all together, but Gbagbo met with Alassane met with Bédié, Gbagbo met with Bédié. So there are signs that they can come together and have a consensus to improve the conditions for a lot of things in the country. So that's why I put the rating to 6. I don't know if I answered the question.
That is great. So you may want to extend it down to the influence from media. How does media leverage this space of consensus building towards policy issues, discussions on policy issues?
I think they are doing the maximum that they can, because at the same time they pay attention because, as I said, if you don't pay attention to what you say, you can see yourself they can just catch you and put you to prison. But there are a lot of media, a lot of things that are said about this reconciliation every day. I think they are contributing to preparing people that it's something that the country needs, and they have to to think about the good of the country, the world population, and they don't want that the demons of war come back again in the country. So I think they are contributing, they are preparing people's minds to this reconciliation.
Thank you very much, Ezekiel, for that. I'll move to Gilchrist on the same issue. How would you rate the opportunities for consensus building in Zimbabwe? And then how does the media also leverage this space, or what are the challenges that they face if it's not so good? After Gilchrist, I will come to Euphrasia, and then I'll come to Ferdinand. Gilchrist, are you there?
Yes, I'm there. I would put it at 5 out of 10 because you see, consensus building, is relative, and the nation, there can be consensus building on certain key national issues, not on all national policy issues. So on certain issues, consensus buildings exist, but on certain issues, there is it's polarized along many political ideologies and political parties. So that's the main justification for my 5. Then on the media, you see, the media is critical within this space of EIDM and EIDM because they set the agenda and they are key in they set the agenda and the issue of evidence communication is also their critical role. But however, you find that the media in most countries in Zimbabwe and it's polarized along ideological positions. It's not independent, you see. So yes, just as much as they have a role to play, but also the media is polarized along ideological positions and editorial policies. So for example, in Zimbabwe, we still have a media controlled by the state, which is huge, and the so-called private media, which is a small component. So it all depends on the editorial policies of the media and whether whatever topic is whatever issue we are bringing forth as evidence brokers, as researchers, is it topical and is it relevant to the is it relevant or is it challenging the status quo? You see, because most of unfortunately there's lack of, we have what's called successful failures, in the EIDM and in the EIPM space and the media space. We have a successful failure in the sense that we have the structures and the systems, but we continue to fail to deliver. So these are what we call successful failures, that the structures and the systems exist, but we fail year after year, but we continue to maintain the systems and the infrastructure, such as the media, such as the policy institutions, such as the State Department. So this is just my take for now.
Thank you very much, Gilchrist, also on that. We'll come to you, Euphrasia. You were there.
Yes, sure, I'm there.
Great.
So actually, my rating on a scale of 10 will be 3, in between 3 and 4, maybe 3.5, I would say. Why do I give this rating? Because I give this rating actually from an assessment of the ongoing situation in my country, because I don't really see that my country really supports or promotes an environment of dialogue. Because for there to be a consensus, I think that there should be a dialogue and there should be a free and fair space of dialogue. So we really don't have that in my country. Why? Because as I earlier mentioned, from political issues to economic issues are largely not debatable. I really don't see that as a friendly environment. It's like I was cut off, sorry for that. I really don't see that as a friendly environment for consensus, because stakeholders actually don't have that voice, or even if they have the voice, it ends on papers and promises. You actually don't see that of the citizens of the country. So how does the media, leverage that opportunity, or what challenges are they facing when it comes to that arena of decision making that the political atmosphere presents? I think that 4 years that we have the Anglophone crisis have actually seen a lot of media persons go to jail. As I speak, we actually currently have a lot of journalists in jail. We have lawyers in jail simply for defending or calling on the government to respect human rights and to respect the rights of the citizen, of the Cameroonian citizens. It's not a very friendly environment for consensus. And just like the case of Cote d'Ivoire, you have to watch what you say. You actually have to watch what you say, because it can just be the last free speech you make before you're entering jail. So actually, it's a tough political environment, and one of terror, I dare to say. And that's why you see the current socio-political
I want to believe that we're having some technical issues from Euphrasia. Euphrasia, if you can hear us, you can just position yourself a little better and then continue for us. Yes, we can hear you now.
I hope it's not the Cameroon government gagging.
Yes, Euphrasia, can you hear us?
I was actually wondering if I'm the only one, if it was internet on my side that was a problem. But yeah, actually I was having difficulties hearing Euphrasia. And the bits that I had were very, very interesting. I wish I could hear all of it.
Certainly. The story in Cameroon is quite interesting and would be very good to hear out. But in the meantime, whilst we wait for Euphrasia to get back to us, Ferdinand, you may want to take the next role then.
Yes, thanks. Thanks a lot, Christian. I hope you can hear me well.
Yes, we can hear you.
And I was just thinking about that question, whether the economy or the environment is more attuned to consensus building. And like Euphrasia, I would give Kenya a very low rating, between 3 and 4 actually. And thinking through it, or the examples I have is just thinking what causes this. Is one thing could be that elections are often highly contested, and there is rarely an emergence of outright winner. It's usually between 52% and 48%. And so the different factions or political groupings are always angling towards toppling the government of the day, or trying to show that they're better instead of coming together, or always looking forward to the next election so that they can say they are better. And so Kenya is one of those countries where elections start, campaigns start 1 year after an election has been held, because the opposition goes into the trenches to try and put the government on the toes and show that they're better without a lot of consensus coming in. But the best example, and the reason why I'm giving it a 4 or even going to a 3, is that in 2017, we ushered in those elections. And in the new constitution, we have a president and a deputy president. And in the constitution, a president cannot sack the deputy unless the deputy resigns or is impeached. And since 2018, the president and the deputy have gone separate ways, to the extent that in the last 1 year, they are having open public exchanges. The president will say one thing today and the deputy says tomorrow, contradicts the president. And it has gone on for the last 2 years. And to enable the president rule, he has now brought in one of the opposition leaders and their supporters. So rather than build consensus, look for a way of vanquishing the person who does not agree with you, even if you're in the same government, which is really, really a pity. So I would give it between 3 and 4. especially on the evidence of the last 3 or 4 years. But the media, on the other hand, the media would give it quite a high score, because over the years, and I credit this to a very vibrant civil society in this country that has embarked on really enhancing the rights of the citizenry, and encouraging the citizenry to stand for their rights, supported by the media. So the media has actually come into the space as a critical force, both to the government, but also in terms of our topic today, in terms of evidence to policy or critiquing policy. The media is very active, and on the basis of what we see in the print media, in the TVs and whatnot. And I'll just give 2 examples so I don't hog a lot of time. Like yesterday or 2 days ago, there was a huge fuel increase in the prices of fuel in Kenya. And the last 2 or 3 days, I have seen good stories in the media where they've invited panelists and specialists in fuel, in the economy, the implications, where they've had sober debate about the cost of this, the implications of this, and informing the public what options there are to put the government on their toes, which to me has been quite impressive. A second example is we are also bringing in a new system of education called the CBC competency-based curriculum. And God, in the last 1 month, I've listened to panelists, experts in education, policy, economy, etc., who the media has brought in place to offer expert opinion about the implications of this. So the media in Kenya would put it at a high, and it's exciting mainly because over in the 80s or 90s, when we had a former President Moi, who was a dictator, the media was really gagged. It's a kind of scenario that Euphrasia was talking about, where a story would erupt and the writers of this, the reporters or those who shot it would disappear, or they'd be incarcerated. But right now, unless you're doing something seditious or outrightly wrong, or you're subversive of the government efforts, if you're just raising an opinion that is contrary to what the ruling, the government of the day is for, we don't see cases of people being taken to prison. And the media is very vibrant. You see cases of corruption, cases of criminal government activity being brought into the media, and most of the times experts are brought to give their opinion. So I would give a 7 to the media. Over.
All right, thank you very much, Ferdinand, for that view on the consensus building, and then how the media takes advantage of that for policy discourse. Euphrasia, we missed you at one point. If you're back, you may want to just wrap up your submission for us.
Sure. Thank you very much for the second chance. Actually, I was describing a scenario where the media doesn't actually have that opportunity to leverage on, mobilizing situations or creating an environment to foster consensus building. Why? Because they themselves are being manned by the government. As I was giving illustrations, we have actually one very prominent Cameroonian journalist of the private sector who actually had to flee the country. Why? Because she was reporting on the ongoing Anglophone crisis, and the government actually, incarcerated her, and it was not easy. There was a lot of riot, and finally she was released. I was just using this example to say that on paper, Cameroon has very good laws, but actually in reality, that's not the case, because you have this systemic approach to, streamlining every conversation to favor the ruling party. Yeah, and anything that is not along their party discipline and ideology is considered terror and even, forbidden. Yeah, for discussion.
Okay, thank you very much for that wrap up, Euphrasia. Looks like there are certainly different contexts that we're dealing with here, and it's good for the conversation because we can share ideas on how some of these things play out within our various jurisdictions. My next point, I would be coming to you, Gilchrist, to start with you. But I would want you to look or describe for us how access to scientific resources and competences are. What's the status, what's the situation of access to scientific and general information is like within your various countries. So I'll start with you, Gilchrist. I'll come to you, Euphrasia. I do Ferdinand, then I come to Ezekiel. Gilchrist. Mr. Ndongo, are you there? You're muted.
Yeah. Yes. If you look at the access to scientific publications, you need to look at the political economy of knowledge production in Africa versus the demand and supply of evidence within our context, within the national decision-making and policy-making infrastructure. So one of the key issues which come up within the supply side of scientific evidence and access to scientific evidence is whose evidence counts. That's the first key within a national government system or a comparison state, or whose evidence counts. Who are the suppliers of evidence? And there's need also for access and acceptability of scientific evidence. There's need to build trust and relationship over time as knowledge brokers, because you'll find that evidence or scientific publications or evidence is more acceptable when there's trust and relationship over a period of time. So one of the key issues again is does high quality evidence may not exist or be hard to access, or may exist in formats which are not conducive to decision making. It's another quite a big issue within our context. And then most of within an evidence ecosystem or evidence infrastructure, there's also issues of whether the evidence or scientific publication we are providing or the research which you are doing is driven by a problem. So I believe also as knowledge brokers and researchers, there's need to have what is called a problem-driven approach, where we don't necessarily where perhaps we don't just supply the evidence, but the evidence should be relevant to the national problem, should be relevant to the national challenges. It should be able to challenge the national status quo. You see now. So perhaps now, so within that context, you'll find then there's insufficient and unsystematic coordination between those demanding the evidence, the scientific evidence, and those supplying the evidence. So there is no coordination between the two, you see, because as one author has said that researchers or knowledge brokers and policymakers are parallel travelers, that they're parallel travelers on the same plane. So there's no coordination, there's systematic, there's unsystematic coordination. So, and also we need to look at issues to do with the timeliness and windows of opportunity when supplying the scientific documents. We felt that we need to identify windows of opportunity to which evidence can be used to the maximum by both policymakers and evidence providers. Within all this, it is also we need also to look at the fact that trying to influence policy or decision making or governance or development issues with evidence or scientific research is a political process. It's inherently a political process. You cannot leave out politics when you're trying to influence evidence. So values and beliefs and policymakers' perceptions are key. There's need to understand the policymakers' perceptions and values and beliefs, because policymakers are more likely to trust research that confirm their pre-existing opinions or experiences, although we need also to challenge that. You see. So these are some of the issues which perhaps we face within our context in Zimbabwe. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Gilchrist, for those. So certainly, this is the last round of conversations we're having about the general society, the descriptives. I mean, after this, we'll be moving into the discussion about the risks that we face for potential service provision. Yeah, we'll go a little into those. The time we had aimed for this discussion was to close at 5 p.m. GMT, but seems because we couldn't start early, we may have to do a bit more than that. And so we will try to keep the conversations also as succinct as possible so that we can have our audience also share the perspectives before we wrap up. On that note, I will come to you, Euphrasia. What their status is like, what will you describe as the status of access? How difficult or easy is it to have access to scientific resources or general information? Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Keka. So actually, I will say that it's averagely not very difficult to get to access scientific information. I'll start with my sphere of influence, which is the university. Actually, we have libraries. We equally have online materials nowadays. Thanks to information technology, the internet. I think at least there is enough. There's increase to access to scientific information, but I really wonder from the demand side if that actually is enough, because I also, within my international network, specifically Cochrane, we actually are having discussions around a lot of research waste, which means that a lot of scientific information actually goes unused. Yeah, it's not being accessed, although they are existing there, but they are not actually accessed or actually put into practice. So I want to say, my country specification when it comes to demand for evidence or scientific knowledge, I think it's very low. It's very low because of the the decision-making framework actually doesn't demand for that. Because I take a very simple example: healthcare. As a healthcare user, actually, I've seen very outdated drugs, medications, or maybe treatment diagnosis being still used nowadays in largely our health centers and even the regional hospitals that actually serve the regions, which are some sort of reference hospitals. And in the case of unforeseen maybe damages, nobody's being held accountable for that. So I would say that our sociopolitical atmosphere also doesn't actually demands for or encourages the use and the access to scientific information, because there is that missing link, that accountability for these decision makers. And you actually have people going scot-free after actually having caused a lot of damage. Why? Because of their negligence or their old-fashioned way of doing things, that executiveness and things like that, actually owing to the not paying attention to evidence and or maybe accessing scientific information to inform that decision making. Thank you.
Very much appreciated, Euphrasia. So if I get you right, the problem is not much of the production, but rather from the use side. And that is well taken note of for Cameroon. Next, I would come to Ferdinand about Kenya. How is access and use of scientific publications and general information? What's the status of that within the country? Ferdinand, I think you are muted.
Oh, sorry, I was speaking to myself. I just said thanks a lot for the opportunity again. And I'm just looking at a quick way to say this in the interest of time. I would rate Kenya highly in the supply of evidence. And let me just background this by the often disconnect stated in the literature a lot, which shouldn't be there anyway as of now, that there's the disconnect between research and policymakers, where researchers say policymakers are not using our evidence, and the policymakers say, okay, the researchers, it's either the evidence or the scientific publications are not available, and therefore, or the evidence does not answer the questions that we are interested in answering. And so the whole stuff is thrown out. For Kenya, I would say there is a wide array of research and also policy institutions, and institutions that try to mediate between research and policy. For example, all government ministries do have a research and policy department, which say they have commitment to the use of evidence in policy formulation. We also have specific government institutions dealing with policy. For example, the Kenya Institute of Policy, Kenya Institute of Public Health Research and Analysis, KIPRA. Then we have academic institutions that do have policy analysis departments, but also research to teach and support policy making. And some of these academic institutions, universities, are often consulted or contracted by government. We also have semi-autonomous, so-called SAGAs, semi-autonomous government agencies and institutions like the Kenya Medical Research Institute that produces lots of information. And again, we also have local and international NGOs or research institutions. The first that comes to my mind, I would say, is where I worked before, the African Institute for Development Policy, that concentrates exactly on translating research into policy or training government and government officials on how to translate research into policy. But we also have other institutions that don't necessarily do policy, but they support for their research. They have a policy department, or all their research has policy implications, which they do. And then we also have international organizations in Kenya. So there is evidence, but of course there's always that complaint, oh, there is the evidence and it's not available. I would counter that argument now, and also in the recent 10 years or so with the spread of technology, that it's an argument that one would say 20 years ago, where everything had to be printed and put in a book in a library. Now we have the online resources that you can just drop in any research material done and can be easily accessible. But also Kenya, for any research to be conducted in Kenya, you need a permit from the National Council for Science, Technology and Innovation. And one of the requirements, once you can complete your research, is that you deposit a copy of the research with the government institution, soft copy. So the supply should be there. But also, I hasten to add that what I'm describing is an ideal situation. Whether that actually happens or not is something to look into. But from my personal experience, for example, when I completed my PhD, and then I did a postdoc, but I did not give a copy. I was given a permit for my PhD research work by the government, by the NACOSTI. And then I came back to ask for another research permit, and they asked me if I had deposited a copy of my PhD findings. And in the form, I was like, I did not do this. Maybe I can just say yes or not. So I apologized to the government and to everyone. I said yes, and I hadn't. But actually, somebody checked and brought to my attention that, Mister, you have not given us a copy, or we don't have that copy with us. So all researches conducted in Kenya should be available, and so access should be there. The problem would be, again, as Euphrasia said, and my colleagues have said, it's in the utilization. That's how I'd characterize it.
Sure. Thank you very much. And I very much appreciate that personal, experience that you shared in terms of how the system works to verify or validate claims made, with respect to the production and use of evidence, in this case, the production. Those are areas that I think need a lot of strengthening within our ecosystems on the continent. I will come to you, Ezekiel, for your final word on this, and then we will move on to the second part of our conversation. Ezekiel.
Thank you. For me, problem of accessing the scientific evidence is related to the level of education in the country. In Cote d'Ivoire, you have 47% of people that have an education level that is below the primary school, among which you have 18% that have no formal education. So if you conduct research, you do studies, and you have the results, you have to think, and you want the maximum people to be informed about this. You have to think about how you want to bring these results to people. That's why I really like how Afrobarometer disseminate their results among the countries where they are present. They used to organize the public disseminations, and they used to do it every month during 4 months, and then they have some interventions on the local radios, on television. Those are the ways that could bring those information to the maximum number of people in the country. When it comes to the policy makers, they have their own institutions that do research for them. In Cote d'Ivoire, you have the Ivorian Center for Scientific Research. So when the government wants, they are thinking about something and they want to check or do research about that, they are going to ask this institution to do research for them on this specific topic. But what is produced from the universities, from the other private centers like mine, they always don't look at that, especially when the results are not in line with what they think, like I think Gilchrist said in his country. So this is the situation in Cote d'Ivoire, and I think I will stop here.
All right, thank you very much. At least that gives a good idea of how the production and use of evidence is like there. I would come to you, Gilchrist. Are you there? If you're there, just respond and let me know, because Gilchrist sent me a message that there is a power situation in Zimbabwe. I think there's a load shedding, which is affected where he is joining the call from. Gilchrist, if you're there, you may want to just indicate to us. Okay, Gilchrist is not there. So we have at the moment, I think Euphrasia also dropped. So we have Ezekiel and then Ferdinand with us. So we might just alternate between the two of you in the meantime, before if Euphrasia would have to join us again. So Ferdinand, let me come to you. What is the situation like with respect to so now we're going more into the socioeconomic conditions within the country with respect to evidence and the risks for the supply of services or the entry into the markets within the countries. Specifically, what we would want to look at the ease of access to political and administrative public offices. How easy or how difficult is it to access political and administrative public offices? And also on the international opportunities for the international transfer of funds. How difficult or easy is it to transfer funds to and from your respective countries, particularly opportunities also for funding by international organizations? So Ferdinand, you may want to start that for us, and then we can have Ezekiel.
Okay, yeah, thanks once again. I'll just begin probably from where I left in the analysis I did very quickly, and to try and respond to that. What I would say is, in view of the many institutions that I highlighted that do evidence to policy, try to build that nexus, I would say Kenya has a well established regulatory framework that accommodates local and international AEI evidence-informed decision-making programs and groups. So if you're coming from within the country, there are certain regulations that you abide by, but also if you're coming internationally, you're also treated as an international group or person. And in view of the history that we have over the last 10 years, quite a lot has happened in this field. So there are regulations. You'll not be going into an open minefield. And this is courtesy of the fact that also a lot of research has happened in this country. And also many of these groups do have international collaborators. So you just need to, if I give an example, for example, of research, if you went for ethics clearance in for example, the University of Nairobi, you'd find there are categories. If you're a student, these are the forms you bring in, this is the amount you pay. If you're a PhD student, if you're a non-PhD, if you're a Kenyan student, if you're an institution out there. So there is regulations that if you meet them, then there is complete ease. There is no like discrimination in terms of whether you're local or international. The funny bit is if you're international, you're asked to pay more for the ethics fees, and I haven't established exactly why there is why the fees differ, because the evaluation is the same. Why? I don't know. Is it because maybe Americans or British or people from outside of the country have supposedly more money or not? But again, I realized also where foreigners coming to do anything in the country, like even visit the national parks, the payment is different. I don't know if that's the same in Ghana or in other countries. And sometimes the differences are quite huge. In terms of like almost 10, 20 times more for foreigners. So there is that, but there is a regulatory framework for that. And also ease of access to public offices over the last 10 years. This has actually been opened up. And the thing is to know clearly which office do you need to go to have your stuff done. So that's how I would characterize that. But again, also in the era, in terms of policy and research and evidence use, I would say the presence of a wide array of actors is testament to the fact that actually the government does see the importance of evidence use in policymaking. But what does acceptability mean? What does it mean to say that the government does see value in the use of evidence? I give this example. If you're an international group coming to Kenya, or even a local group coming to Kenya to try to support government in the use of evidence, and you have, for example, like workshops or trainings, the government would be happy to release its employees to come for the seminar or the workshop or the 1 week or 2 weeks. But the government will not fund. As long as you come fully funded, they will be on it. And they'll say, yes, we approve, evidence is good. We actually want more and more of our people to have the skills to use the evidence. But what does it mean to say you approve or you accept when you don't put your money into it? And the second thing is the framework that we often use, for example, is like you train a few trainer of trainers, a few heads of departments, and these heads of department are supposed to get back.
Hello? Seems we're missing Ferdinand also now. Euphrasia, can you hear me?
Yes, sure. Okay.
Great. So it seems Ferdinand is the one that has been probably a technical challenge at his end. So you may want to take over, Euphrasia, the question before I come to Ezekiel. So the question was, how easy or difficult is it to have access to public officials, political and administrative public officials in Cameroon? And then you may want to add also the ease, the ease of funds transfer to and from Cameroon as well as what the situation is like for international organizations funding, activities within Cameroon.
Okay, thank you. Actually, when it comes to access to government officials, it's they're quite accessible. But when it comes to, like, access to influencing the decision making, or influences the way they do things, influences the uptake to evidence, I don't really think that there's much that is left debatable, because at the start of the year, usually government agencies and institutions, they have their plan of activity. And if, just like Ferdinand was saying, if you're bringing in something new, a new idea, maybe you're coming to, facilitate a workshop, a training, or coming to assist them with evidence uptake, evidence access, and all of that. As long as you're funding, yes, and a very big yes to you. But when it comes to, commitment, financial commitment, or material commitment from, from states and, government institutions, you actually don't have that flexibility with their budget. You don't have that flexibility with their budget. So many a times, yes, they're ready, they're available to send their officials, especially lower level officials, like, those are the subdivisional levels, the divisional levels, and maybe the regional levels, to come attend seminars and trainings. By the end of the day, it's just another activity and a box ticking event for them, because at the end of the day, it's not actually something, because they do not actually commit to it financially, or maybe it was not actually along the lines of their annual activities. You actually will not have that accountability of, like, what did you do with this knowledge that was acquired, and things like that. So the other aspect that you asked me about funding to and from Cameroon, I think that we have monetary limits that we have with the use of various money agencies. But of recent, I think 3 years back, with the existence of the Anglophone crisis, and, government began realizing that maybe external individuals external out of the country, maybe the diaspora of Cameroon is supporting the separatist fighters by, transfer of funds from the diaspora into the country to let them buy weapons and things like that from neighboring Nigeria and all that. So they started, placing restrictions on how much can be sent, and, for that's a lot of justification and paperwork for any money that has to be transferred, especially into Cameroon, and things like that. And the last question, I did not quite get it very well. Please, can you repeat so that I react to it?
So the last one was about international organizations, and what's the potential for international organizations to fund activities within Cameroon.
Okay, so just like the first reaction, yes, it's I think there is relative accessibility for them to do that, especially when they are passing through local organizations, NGOs here in Cameroon, because that's the wider channel. They usually pass through, grants and donations to local organizations here in support of their activities, especially those ones that are registered, legally recognized, so that they can actually or rule out activities like that. But at the national level, they actually pass through ministries, which at the end of the day just turn out to be another, in quotes, feasting activity, because, embezzlement of funds, and maybe just window dressing activities at the end of the day, sharing of PDMs and, allowances and things like that. And it's actually, at the end of the day, you actually don't see this thing. My frustration is you don't actually see this thing actually translate to improving the livelihoods of individuals. But I would not want to say it's bad, because you have a couple of non-governmental organizations that are actually doing a great deal of job on the ground, but just that their efforts are being frustrated by the lack of institutionalization of this of evidence, or the evidence culture, what I like to call the evidence culture. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Euphrasia. And touching on the evidence culture is one area that I'll be coming to next. But let's take you, Ezekiel, if you're there. how easy or difficult is it to have access to public political and administrative officers in La Cote d'Ivoire? And then you can touch on the funding situations, opportunities for international funding of activities, as well as the ease of transfers, fund transfers. Thank you.
Thank you, Kirkhoff. The access to public political or administrative officials here in Cote d'Ivoire is quite easy, but it depends on what you request or what you want when accessing them. If you need data, if you need things that they have to get kind of permissions, or they can worry about. You can get easily access to them, but you won't get easily what you are requesting. Let me give you this example. I was working on a project, a World Bank project, and my supervisor wanted some data from the National Statistic Bureau, and they just sent an email from DC, from Washington, and requested the data. And a few weeks later, they didn't get the data. They tried to call a phone number that was indicated on the website. They didn't pick the phone. And then finally, she asked me how to if I can take care of that. And I had a friend that was working there, and I called him, and in 2 or 3 days, I got what she was looking for, 3 or 4 weeks. So it's easy, but it depends on what you are looking for, and if you know somebody, you know people you are dealing with, it's much more easier, even if what you are requesting is problematic or confidential. You can still get something if you know people. That's why there is a common say here that says knowledge is better than a diploma. Like, if you know somebody, it's better than having a diploma. You can have a PhD and go somewhere. If you don't know anybody there, you are not going to get what you are looking for. So that's what I can say about the access to public and administrative officials. About the funds transfer, there are limits. International transfer, there are limits that are, I think, in every country. Here in Cote d'Ivoire, you have the central bank that have limits. And then, because we are in a monetary zone, WAEMU, West African Economic and Monetary Union, there are regulations that they impose. So you have to those regulations that are set have to be took into account when you have to do the international transfers. So for some limits, you have to get the authorization of the Ministry of Finance. Yeah, the limits are known, and if you don't have very big amount, that shouldn't be a problem. What else? I think that's all.
So thank you very much. I think the similarities are quite revealing, and okay. So we missed Ferdinand at one point, and Ferdinand is back with us. Ferdinand, if you're there, you would want to finish up your submission quickly, and then we'll take the final round of issues to react to. After that, we will open opportunity for our audience if they want to make some comments and then or ask questions. Yes, Ferdinand.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you well now.
Okay, great. Yeah, sorry I dropped. I'll just say 1 or 2 sentences just to wrap up. In terms of the transfer of funds, I think that's probably where I dropped off at. Just like my other colleagues have said, there is ease, I would say, for that transfer. It's just that there are certain regulations that you need to meet, and also the institutions, that regulatory framework. There is no limit to what you can transfer, but the onus of making sure that you follow the rules and regulations of the country is placed on the institution that you're collaborating with. And there are certain structures that you need to follow, and that happens. And like I said again, Kenya has a lot of institutions, do a lot of collaborations, and so the framework is well set. And as long as you meet those conditions, then there is ease of transfer. And there's also ease of access to government and public officials. Depending on the level of information that you need, they'll definitely give you. And if it's classified information, they'll just also let you know that this is not the kind of information we are allowed to give out. Of course, there are individual idiosyncrasies, like in all societies. There's some people who are easy to talk to, others are hard. Some will tell you, come tomorrow, come the next day, and after 3 or 4 weeks, you'll give up. Those are individual differences, not systematic. Over.
All right, thank you, Ferdinand. On the last point you made, I can connect very much with that difficulty we're having with the projects that we're trying to run in Kenya.
Yeah.
And
that's what I have in mind.
Yeah, so certainly there are those individual issues that we need to take note of. Coming to you, Euphrasia, since you have internet challenges, you would want to start the last round of our conversation with us. And here we will be looking at the institutional framework for capacity development for evidence use. Specifically, we would want to know, are there training institutions or training centers that are responsible for building capacity within the civil service and the public service generally? But let's focus more on the civil service. And then who drives that agenda? Who drives that agenda? What is the situation like? Is it are the universities, for instance, doing that? What is the content, for instance, that are do you have some ideas on those you would like to share? After Euphrasia, I'll come to Ferdinand and then Ezekiel.
Okay, thank you. So when it comes to capacity building,
and sorry, Euphrasia, just to add that apart from the institutional framework, you may want to add also the issue around the evidence culture, which is the values and attitudes towards evidence that public officials, especially civil servants, what they have. So it's 2 in 1. If we can look at the 2 together, that would be appreciated, Euphrasia.
Okay, thank you. So when it comes to the institutional framework around capacity building, honestly, we have a lot of it, from private institutions to public institutions. And within our most ministerial, the government institutions, I want to say, and parastatals who actually have, research and development arms or organs within these structures. But also, when you also come to the, practicality of the work that they do, the currency in terms of how frequent they do what they do, and how relevant what they do is, I really want to not really rate that very high, because when you look at it, most research and development organs within government, especially public institutions, are relatively dormant. And we equally have also our Bureau of Statistics in Cameroon, and a very vivid example to show how obsolete they are is the case of even our population census. I can tell you that we've not done a population census in Cameroon for the last 10 years, which is something really not normal, because you actually, those are aspects that should actually drive governance and socioeconomic policies and things like that. So when actually capacity building, I want to rate it very high when it comes to private sectors, because especially learning institutions or higher institutions of learning, universities, you have polytechnics and things like that. And now to link it up to the evidence culture and the attitude towards evidence, as I earlier said, there is not that effective demand for evidence-based decision making. So you actually, have that stalemate when it comes to research and the priority they give to research and the weight that even these training institutions give to research. And you see a majority of students reducing their research work to copy and paste and, kind of scenario. So I want to say that it's actually, on an average, not very inspiring when you look at the attitudes and the culture surrounding evidence generation, production, use, and value or valorization.
Thank you very much, Frazier, for that succinct one once again. I'll move to Ferdinand. If you're there, you may want to continue for us what the institutional framework for capacity development looks like in Kenya, and then also the evidence culture, specifically in terms of the values and attitudes towards scientific innovation. Yeah.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you, Ferdinand.
Oh, okay, great. I'm still audible. I don't know what happened earlier when I dropped. Okay. So in terms of the capacity to use evidence, and I use, if I use the example of the work we did before, unless you have people who've gone to the university and done.
Yeah, just to clarify, the institutional framework in terms of the training institutions, who delivers training, government agencies dedicated to that, or private sector or civil society organizations doing that, who does that in terms of institutionalized approach to capacity development?
Okay, great. Like I said in my earlier, I did give a raft of institutions that are actually do some kind of capacity building in terms of for policy and also for research. But in terms of exactly the capacities imparted to the people doing these courses, for example, this training, is sometimes disjointed and specific. There is no standardization where you can say, if I have this government official, if this office doing evidence and policy coming from this institution would have this kind of capacity. That's something that is actually lacking. And I say this given the example of some of the people we worked with in the Ministry of Health, in the policy department or in the research and analysis. They had varying levels of skill, and therefore you'd not be able to say that this person has the capacity. And that's why the trainings that we were doing with AFIDEP and other institutions came in quite handy. So that lack of standardization of what is capacity, or to say that somebody has the capacity, is a gap that that I see. But and also when we talk about the evidence use culture, if there is actually a difference between people or those who need the evidence, especially in government, saying yes, we want to use that evidence, or we have the capacity to use that evidence, and an actual critical look into what does it mean to say that we want to use that evidence. Because this is not just the end bit of, oh, we want the evidence, but are there institutions, or has the entire culture of evidence use been institutionalized from the point of generating that evidence to translating to using it? I'll give a good example, just from my recent work. We were looking at the health management information system in Kenya, where all the health data is stored in the country. And we're looking at the causes. We wanted to quantify the causes of maternal mortality. And we realized that the government has a tool that is supposed to record causes of maternal mortality all over the country. And it has been using this tool for it has been collecting data for the last 10 years. But there has never been an analysis of this data. How did we realize that? And how did we come to the conclusion that this is just a tool there that nobody actually uses? Is because in this tool, we could not identify of all the data, the cause of that maternal mortality. It is not recorded. And if this tool was in place and somebody was actually using it, they would have noticed that there is a mistake in that tool and corrected it in the last 10 years. So there is that bit of paying lip service, or stating that we are actually interested in use of evidence in policy making, but we are not putting in place the structures or in putting in place a culture of continuous improving the system to enable us actually use that evidence. Even though, as my colleagues have said, if you go for meetings and workshops, they will tell you, okay, yeah, evidence is good, we normally use, we are encouraging the use of evidence, but what does it exactly mean? If I just conclude, because this being the last rounds, one of the things I wanted to actually just talk about in wrapping up is when we talk about the risks when you enter into the space of internationalization of evidence use environments or making the whole process international, is there are a couple of things to consider. I wouldn't call them risks. I would just say these are just potentials or considerations to have in place for the internationalization of the EIDM processes. One is a general, that the evidence itself is not as straightforward and complete as desirable. Like I just said, you may have the evidence there that is not complete and not used, but also the environment itself. Two, that we have to consider what is the entry level for this internationalization. Is it at organizational level? Is it at ideological level? Or is it at resource addition? What is the added value for the internationalization? And also, what's the mode of entry? Preferably would be consultations from the mooting of the idea, the rationale, and the outcome, involving all stakeholders at the initial level so that they get a buy-in of the idea of the internationalization. And to also watch against potential for duplication during the internationalization. But also to consider the fact that most of the evidence teams in each country do also have other international connections and funders. So at what level that internationalization happens is important to consider. But also at the same time that this is an enterprise that has an end result, increasing the use of evidence in policy making, but also is an opportunity for research and job creation. And this needs to be put into consideration to avoid misunderstandings amongst the different stakeholders and the different partners. I don't know if that sort of answers or responds to the issues that you wanted me to respond to, Kishu.
Yes, I think it adequately responds well, and especially when you touch on the key areas that we should look at instead of considering them as risks, possibly looking at them as things we should take note of, which indicators we should look out for when trying to extend such services to the various jurisdictions, and those are very much noted. We'll come to Ezekiel to do the final submission for us in this session, after which we will open up opportunity for colleagues in the audience to ask or make comments. Ezekiel.
In Cote d'Ivoire, we have what they call DFP, the Fonds de développement de la formation professionnelle. In English, we would say Vocational Training Development Fund. So it's created by the government, where all the enterprises in the country will pay taxes so that this institution have money to train, to build capacity of all people who work in the country, even in the public or private sector. So for myself, I went through a training through this mechanism. So this is an institution. They are autonomous, but it's created by the government so that they can build capacity in the country. Apart from that, you have institutions that want their own capacity building. At that moment, they have to identify which institution they want, where they want to go for capacity building, and what they are looking for as training. So I don't know if that was the question about the institutional framework for capacity building. So in Cote d'Ivoire, it's what we have. And for the evidence culture, I would say it's very recent, and it's not deep enough in the country. There are still a problem for accessing data, accessing results from research in the country. But we have some institutions that do research in the agriculture sector or in the socio-economic sector that the government has created or the private sector has created. So these institutions do research and the government support them, but the idea of taking results from research that are independently done to make decisions based on that, it's I would say it's rare in the country. That's why I was saying that the culture is recent and not deep enough. I would stop there.
Yeah, that's very much appreciated. But Ezekiel, before you let go, what about the universities? How is it like? How do they interface with government? I mean, policy space.
Okay, so normally when they
especially in terms of I mean in terms of training, offering training or academic programs towards policy development, and then also the use in terms of the critical and analytical use of evidence for decisions.
So this is through the center, the Ivorian Center for Scientific Research that they are created. It's not exactly in the university here in Abidjan, but it's very near, and they work all together with the university. So it's like it's independent from the university, but it's a government institution. So when they do research, so they are funded by the government. They have a budget that's where the government contributes to, and when it's come to a specific topic that the government wants research on, they are going to ask that institution is called CIRES, not University of Abidjan. So CIRES will just give them the budget to prove, or if they want researchers or they want experts on that issue, the CIRES will identify those experts for them, and they are going to conduct the study or the research for the government. But when it's something they want the CIRES to do, if it's included in their budget, they are going to do it by their own. But if it's additional, they need additional funding, the government will fund them for this specific research. I don't know if that's what the answer to your question.
Sure, that's okay. At least I get to understand the institutional arrangements to some extent, and certainly there will be follow-ups after these conversations to go a little deeper into these areas. At this point, I will give opportunity to colleagues in the audience. We have a few of you still with us. We have Ahmed, we have Alan, and we have Ian Hoopwood. If you're in there, you can hear us and you want to ask some questions or add some comments, please do that in the next couple of minutes. Now, you may want to raise your hand, then we can invite you in to make your submission. Yes, Ahmed. Ahmed, I see your hand up. You may want to unmute and then speak to us.
Thank you. First of all, let me congratulate organizer for this great and successful online consultation and its meaningful contribution for all speakers and the quality sharing and recommendations. First, I want to see all these intervention and this contribution. I can't. What I say, it's difficult to categorize my reflection with all these great leaders in sharing that they give us. I'm so glad and so happy for that. Let me reflect with my participation with you in two levels. First of all, in my region, MENA, Middle East and the North African region, I joined an organization which calls Article 19, which its aim is defending freedom and expression and information around the world. And what I can say, link it with the problem, the issue media that you talking about. I'm working for that in terms of media diversity. If, in my view, if truth can not acceptable for our decision making, cause many reasons, I suggest one view which may be helpful to be safe and speak with the freedom. In this case, invite you, if you have open to take, not to take, to share all these recommendations to my organization, if we can collaborate between us to see how can to create a framework which can facilitate and solve all these kind of problems and weakness for journalists and for defend their freedom and whom want to hold them voice. This is a point. And second point, I'm now a part in community as a working group. I'm a rapporteur in working group peace and security in African Union Economic and Social and Cultural Council. We did in CSO, civic society organization consultation, great consultation, and now we will take all this consultation together, and we will reflect with them in terms of social, economic, and political development and challenges of our continent, with particular focus on the African Union 2021. Theme of the year, the art, culture, and heritage are levers for building the Africa we want. And other for that, to develop a policy booklet by civic society organization that address the various socio-economic and political challenges affecting our continent, Africa. And in this framework, I am working for one topic which depend with the event. I'm working how to get able investing in science and to show this is decision makers and our presidents, our governments that cost benefits for establishing research infrastructures can give a huge solution for each problem in any country, because my view, each country work in its side with international partners in as divided resources. We not think to establish research infrastructure to put all these resources, all these international partnerships, all multidisciplinary acts resources to aggregate all this kind of elements to transform them to solution which adapt in any kind country, which create synergy between countries, and we give better understanding between people in each country, and give understanding with all governments, or which fighting with cause masunderstood for each other, and it's maybe a solution for that. And now I can add some issues that
So Ahmed, you may, we're running out of time, certainly. So you would want to give opportunity for colleagues also to pass a few comments before we can close up. Is that okay with you?
Okay, welcome. I hope that the view is clear, or
it is very clear, and it's well appreciated, because certainly we're looking for opportunities to collaborate in the North Africa region, and obviously we appreciate your time to attend through these sessions, and we certainly should be coming to you when we want to get into the North Africa region. We have an Iron Hoop word. Your hand is up. You may want to unmute and then share your own perspectives with us briefly before, as we wrap up. Iron.
Thank you so much. Good evening. Thank you for very interesting presentations. I'm sorry I missed the very beginning of the session. I had other appointments, but I think I got the gist of things and I got some useful information. Maybe the question I would ask the various participants, or the encouragement, is how we join in the dots between the evidence movement and the other actors who are pushing in the same direction. For example, the evaluation associations. Do you have good relations with CAMDEV? Is it, I think, in Cameroon, or Eval, or the Réseau Evalué? There are a couple of associations in Cote d'Ivoire. There was the Kenyan Evaluation Society that presented, in fact. So the connections with the evaluation associations, the evaluation journal, the evaluation conference, AFREA in November, and of course the think tanks as well, the think tank initiative. I think there the connection is made. I think Ferdinand mentioned that he is with AFREDEP, in fact, and I think they were part of the think tank initiative and got support at a certain point in time. I am based in Senegal. I'm teaching both at Sciences Po and also in Senegal with institutions. I'm also on the board of one of the think tanks, CRES, and I'm also on the National Commission for the Evaluation of Public Policies and Programs, and the monitoring of public policies and programs. So I'm sort of dabbling in this a lot in evidence, use of evidence, policy processes, and so on. And so I found this very interesting. Thank you so much. But I'd like just to know if you're connected with these different actors, especially the evaluation associations. Are we building bridges? Are you getting positive and good synergy? Or we're all sitting in our silos? Thank you so much. Congratulations. Keep up the good work. Thank you.
Thank you, Ian. And it's a very useful perspective that you're sharing in here, in that certainly the evidence ecosystem on the continent is evolving at various points organically. And as the Africa Evidence Network, which is leading the Africa Evidence Week, has been doing, trying to build bridges at the moment across nationalities for all organizations within the evidence ecosystems. But certainly, like you mentioned, there are other communities that are also mobilizing organically already. And so it's a very useful conversation to have post this meeting we're having here, possibly to look at how we can then reach out to each other across the various teams that are building up within evaluations and across the other types that you made reference to. Certainly, I will raise this issue up with the chairperson of the AEN and see how we can raise the conversation going forward, and then where necessary we can bring some colleagues like yourself in to advise and provide guidance on what you think will work the best in that direction. Thank you very much. A useful perspective. I don't see any other hand up, but Alan, if you're there and you want to share your perspective, you're the only one left in there. A word would be enough, and then I can then call on colleagues. I mean, thank you all for making the time. Basically, I think this conversation has been very informative in that it draws out the commonalities that exist across the various countries that we've discussed in this session, looking at opportunities as well as the constraints that exist, government support that is available, and then the media and how consensus building and a variety of issues that have been explored here. And I acknowledge this particularly because despite the vast differences across countries on the entire region, on the African continent, these commonalities are coming up, and specifically they come out as extreme difficulties within the evidence ecosystem within each country, which requires some amount of concerted effort to address them. These cannot be surmounted easily because evidence-informed decision-making obviously is part of a political process, which is why we started this conversation looking at the political realities in these countries. And certainly we are going to keep these conversations ongoing and see how we can navigate each of those. Yes, we want to transform lives, but we cannot do these in silos, which is why we need to look for opportunities to build bridges and then share experiences, share lessons, services that exist in one country we may want to share with other colleagues. And these all together, I believe, present opportunities for a sustainable approach towards evidence-informed decision-making in each respective country, as well as for the good people of the continent. On that note, I will want to bring the session to a close and thank you all once again for the time, especially to the panelists who took time off. We have been talking for more than 2 hours, even though we had estimated about an hour to start with. We had estimated about 90 minutes. We've done more than 2 hours now. It tells of the extent of issues that we need to cover and also the energy that exists to keep the conversation going. We appreciate your time also, colleagues who remained with us. Ian, Alan, and then Ahmed especially. We want to say thank you all for the time. Ferdinand, I see your microphone is unmuted. Did you want to share something briefly, and then we can call it a close? Ferdinand, then Ezekiel, and then Euphrasia. Euphrasia, are you there with us? So Ferdinand, please take over if you want to share just a short word, and then we can call it a close.
No, just to say thank you very much, Kirshus, for inviting me to this panel discussion, and nice to meet each one of you. And looking forward to more discussions and hopefully COVID permitting and other conditions permitting, look forward to having a probable face-to-face meeting and exchange of ideas in due course. Thanks a lot. It's been very helpful for me.
Very useful. Yeah. Ezekiel and Euphrasia, final words, comments?
Thank you, Kickoff. I wanted to thank you once again for this opportunity you gave me to attend to this meeting, and thank all the panelists for a lot of things I've learned from them. And yeah, hopefully we could have something in the future like this, and why not better. Thank you. Have a good evening.
You're welcome, Ezekiel. Euphrasia, are you there? Yes, please speak to us.
Yes, I'm there. Thank you very much, fellow panelists. Thank you very much, fellow colleagues, for staying on with us. Thank you, Kickoff. This was a good opportunity, a good learning experience for me, and I'm actually looking forward to further discussions after this, and I really want to appreciate the contribution of Ahmad and Ian. Actually, the long and short of all of this is we have to look for a way of harnessing the synergy that exists between these different initiatives, parallel initiatives within the evidence ecosystem, so that we can get the much of it and not just leave it at the level of conversation. So thanks very much, and we are actually looking forward within and without the African Evidence Network to continue such conversations and see how we can actually converge all of these efforts. Thank you.
You're welcome, Euphrasia, and I wish to say good night to all colleagues. Enjoy the rest of the evening. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye, Alan.
Have a great weekend.